welcome in to part 2 of episode 100. This part of the episode, we will be talking about Secret Project 3. So anyone who would like to join us for Secret Project 3, keep watching. If you're keeping yourself spoiler free for that part 1 of that book, then please don't watch this one. And then we'll be reconvening for Dawnshard as normal next week. So this week is Secret Project 3. And we are going to start with a video that Ranks has put together for us on some of his reactions, and we'll be talking back and forth for it. Yes, Paul?
Right quick, before we hop into it, I have something I'm excited to show everyone, which I've been waiting for a little while. It's not actually that crazy, but I painted a mug, which I don't believe I've shown off yet. Maybe I have. If I have, I feel real dumb.
You haven't.
But I went to this little art studio thing, which was fun, and I painted a mug, a Windrunner mug, and it's got the little, it's very poorly done, but I did my best. Tried to get the Windrunner logo on there, and so my mug for this episode is my official handmade. It's kind of got like a Starry Night thing going on too.
Very nice.
Windrunner mug. So I might make the other Knights Radiant orders too, because it'd be fun. But yeah, I just wanted to show that off before we get started. Thank you all for paying attention.
I might have you make me a Stoneward one.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned that on the podcast, but Spencer, you are a Stoneward, and I will say Stonewards are so cool. The Stoneward order is so cool.
Yeah. And they're okay.
Oh.
Not very reliable,
Yeah, exactly. Not very reliable.
All right, so we will start a discussion with Rank's video here. We'll be pausing in here, and I'll be splitting it up a little bit, and we can talk about what he talks about. So let's start with this.
Hello to Trevor, Paul, Eliot, and everyone listening/watching. My name's David Clamage. I also go by Ringsk, and I'm a patron of Following Noadon and hang out in their Discord quite a bit and love theorizing. I've read all of the Cosmere and am very deep into Cosmere theorizing, so I have a lot of really interesting conversations with Trevor that Paul and Eliot don't get to see, but maybe here's a little taste of it. So I think that there are things you can notice about this story if you've read some of the Cosmere books that haven't been covered yet on the podcast, especially Rhythm of War. There's a bit of that, but also Elantris. There's stuff from Mistborn that I think is relevant, but I think that you can get a lot out of this without knowing those things. But if you do know, then you know. So what I wanted to talk about while I was reading it was, this is clearly Hoid telling the story, just like Secret Project 1. But then that was just outright confirmed in various different ways, including in the endnotes by Brandon himself saying, yep, this is Hoyt narrating. So I guess I can't show off how clever I am for how early I figured out that it was Hoyt, right? But I think there's some really interesting things going on in this world that are worth talking about. It seems kind of minor, but one really interesting thing to talk about is that there's a lot of mathematical things going on here. We've got the Fibonacci sequence that's happened mentioned several times in the story, as well as a lot of prime numbers that come up. And I'm not talking about just Design, who is a cryptic from Roshar, who of course would love sequences of prime numbers. We're talking about the various rituals that are on the sunny planet with Yumi. And so I think that's pretty interesting that maybe numbers are important to these worlds.
All right, quick yes or no around the circle. Did you guys notice the prime number sequence that he's referring to? Tim?
Yes.
Elliot?
Yes, but it didn't seem important.
Spencer?
Not the first time.
And Paul?
Same as Elliot. I noticed, but I didn't think it mattered.
And I think that's just a question that he has, is he noticed it, but I don't know if it's super important. Like Yumi has to hold her breath for 144 seconds, which has all sorts of mathematical implications that number. So, and then there's her ritual has a bunch of prime numbers in it. So there's something strange going on there with maybe the religion. Maybe that actually does have Cosmere implications on it. But as far as we know, that they're just ritualistic.
I mean, we know that Brandon loves random religious significance, right? That, if one world can love symmetry and believe that that's spiritual, then one other world could love prime numbers. Sure, why not? I love the theory. I think it's great.
All right. Another section from Ranks.
Something that's interesting to talk about would be the fact that Hoyd seems to have been frozen in time during this time period, and I guess he got better. And then Design, his cryptic, is sort of just hanging out, waiting for him to no longer be a coat rack. So that's interesting. We can theorize all day about what happened to Hoyd. Is this a common occurrence for him? He didn't seem all that concerned about it when he was telling the story, but who knows? Also, he was somehow aware of this story taking place, even though he was a coat rack at the time. So maybe Design told him the story, or maybe he's inventing it a little bit. But we'll see how that ends up going. Okay,
so for Paul and Eliot, Design is the cryptic that Hoyd bonds at the very end of Oathbringer. You figure this out about not quite, a couple chapters into Rhythm of War, that cryptic's name is Design, and Hoyd becomes a Lightweaver. So that's his cryptic's name is Design, and she's running this noodle shop in this story. So what were you guys' thoughts on that and the implications of him being frozen in time?
I was really, really curious about this. The cryptic design that kind of slotted in is, okay, makes sense. It took me a second to kind of, remember that, but then I was with it. The frozen in time part, like, he's just so nonchalant about it. Like, oh yeah, and by the way, that statue in the corner, yeah, that's me. I'm just chilling. I'm stuck there. Yeah. Oh well. Like, wait, what? That seems like a big deal. Like, it didn't seem like it was something that he chose to do. It seems like it's, he's been imprisoned or captured or turned into a statue. Like, one, who can do this? Where is this power coming from? Two, who we kind of know people are after a Hoyd. Did someone find him? Did one of those other kind of random names we've heard of, did one of them kind of catch up to Hoyd and turn him into a statue? Like, I have questions.
Ishik finally caught up to him. So
Ishik has the power to freeze someone.
Yeah, exactly. I
Wait
will say it. I didn't even really notice that he was frozen in time. I knew he was kind of just like stuck in this corner, but I guess I didn't realize that he was frozen in time. That doesn't fully make sense to me. I don't understand. I didn't pick that up, honestly, and I kind of listened to this twice, but yeah.
Yeah, as I read through this for a second time, or kind of skimmed through it earlier today, I noticed that Hoyd specifically says that he was aware of what was going on around him at that moment. So just like, okay, how, obviously, how did this happen? But how is he still aware of what's going on around him? Like, is it frozen in time in that he just can't move? Or like, he's still aware of what's going on around him. I don't know.
Yeah, I theorize that I definitely place Hoyd in a box closer to shards than regular people. And in my mind, shards have rules, and they can break those rules, but with consequences. And so I'm almost wondering if Hoyd broke a rule, like surrounding himself, that basically caused him to get frozen in time.
I like that theory. There are a couple, I won't go too far into this, but there's a few conversations that are unpublished, not canon, between Frost and Hoyd that talk about rules and the implications of breaking rules. So,
also, something I have to constantly remind myself about Design is that she was about to become Ellikar's Spren.
Yes.
And I can never like wrap my head around that.
Do you remember that part, Paul? You seem to just have your mind blown over there. That's not news to you.
No, I don't remember that. I remember Ellikar like almost having a spren, and we were like, "Whoa, Lightweaver" or something like that. But I didn't. Yeah.
So then,
Also, I just now learned that this is, like we saw at the end of Oathbringer, right? Like Hoyd and a spren, whatever. But I'm a lot of these pieces are coming to me hot off the press right now,
right?
and stuff. So I did not think about that.
So Hoyd goes back to where Ellikar was killed and finds the spren that was hidden in the stone there. So
right.
that is Ellikar's spren that he was trying to bond.
Because in Wave King's Words of Radiance and Oathbringer 2, Ellikar mentions seeing like twisted shapes behind him in mirrors.
Yep.
And one time he specifically says to Kaladin, he's like, and it went away when you came, because the cryptics are afraid of Kaladin and the Honor Spren. And it's just like, oh. Just all coming together.
I remember the moment we just, chalked that up to his paranoia, right? Because he's like, they're out to kill me. I see shapes in the shadows. Like, okay, Ellikar, whatever, man. But no, you're right. As soon as you bring that up, it's like, oh.
He was paranoid, but also right.
All right, let's keep going.
But the main thing that I want to talk about is the magic system here, where especially on the sunny planet, Yumi is able to sort of commune with spirits and convince them to split themselves into two parts. And from those two parts, you have kind of two opposites. And the fact that there's these two opposites now mean that what was once sort of, a normal average is now brought into two extremes. So the example that's given, you could become one ball of light and one ball of sort of bluish dark. And the ball of light is useful, and the dark just sort of hangs out with it. And they use that to light their homes and things like that. Or the gravitation thing, where it seems like, something is floating because there's something that maybe is sinking and something that's rising. So they repel each other like magnets, and that allows things to float. Something that's unclear to me is whether everyone can see these spirits or just Yumi and those like her. We know that only Yumi can talk to them and convince them to do these things, but can everyone see them? I mean, are things floating and they see that it's spirits causing that? Or maybe they can only see them after they've split and become physical. That was not clear to me at all. Maybe someone found something in the text to say one way or the other.
All right. So let me just say right off the bat, the ranks got way more out of that than I did on my reads. I'm trying to wrap my head around what is happening here. Like, there's nothing else like this in the published Cosmere. Eliot and Paul, you're not missing out on anything. You have just as much context as the rest of us when we're here. So there's spirits and they're splitting and they use them to light their homes or whatever. And I'm trying to understand. And then Ranks just seems to get it right off the bat, props to him. What do you guys think?
I think the closest thing we've seen so far is span reads and like conjoined fabrials. That's like the closest thing to what it's describing as like a spirit split into two doing opposites, I guess.
Is Elliot going to pull up his graph about span reads across the world and tangential velocity and stuff?
Don't give me another excuse to, because I will bore you guys to death if you ask me. I didn't even pick up on the fact that there were two different planets here. I'm gonna have to go back and reread this again. I focused in completely on Painter's planet. I was thinking about all of that. And I now realize, like, combining some of the elements of Yumi's setting with that. So now I have to go back and kind of divorce those two again, because I didn't even catch. I was trying to figure out like how the two were, where they were in relationship to each other and all. But yeah, the opposites thing, very interesting.
Go ahead, Paul. I'll go after you.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit, Elliot, and also talking about what Trevor said earlier. Ranks is bringing up really great points, which I'm excited to keep diving into on the magic system. But just to give insight on what my thoughts were about reading this, I was like, "Oh, light blue and fuchsia, that's beautiful." Like I was like, "Pretty colors we have here," and he's like, "Oh yes, the intricacies of this magic system. Like, can everyone see? You know, like." We're kind of playing two different ball games here with our first impressions, but
And you're
I
like,
was
oh,
able
that's
to go
pretty.
back.
You know,
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to figure out what things looked like and whatnot, but what Elliot was saying, it was my like second time that I was reading things. Whenever I actually realized either that or at the very end of the story of the 7 chapters we got was whenever I realized they weren't on the same planet or in the same place because I was confused about that for a little while.
we can. I want to save some of the planet talk for later because Ranks does bring it back up. So we'll save our theories on the 2 different planets, but they are 2 different planets. And one thing I will say is a lot of people were theorizing in our Discord that the 1 star in the sky for Painter's planet is Yumi's planet, and the bright star for Yumi's planet is Painter's planet. Does that make sense? That
Because it even briefly mentioned on Painter's planet that they can see this star and see that there are people on it. So we
Yes.
at least know that they're close enough that they can see that.
Yeah, taking this a slightly different direction, are we going to talk about where he compares the light to light bulbs, where he talks about that?
yes, that's coming up. We'll be talking
awesome.
about that here in a second. Let's keep going. Thanks to the video.
Verbiage that's used on both planets, binding. So, on Yumi's planet, we have these spirits being bound to be split apart and bound in this way that I just described. But on the Nightmare planet, the Dark planet, we have these same kind of spirit things. It seems like both of them may be, just free-floating investiture that's become somewhat sentient, which I'll talk about a bit later. And you can bind them by, through the cognitive realm, you can bind them to be, a specific form or shape. And then by making that harmless instead of, based on, powerful nightmare thoughts, you can give it other powerful thoughts that aren't so nightmarish. And then they become bound, and you can bind them to be bamboo or, something that can't move. And then they can no longer feed. They run out of investiture. They seem to be fueled by investiture. They run out of it, they evaporate, and they're gone. So, even though these 2 magic systems seem very different, I think they are definitely related. Now, here comes my big theory.
I'll pause it right there.
Come on.
Well, we'll get there. Okay, so something that I wanted to bring up, which I'm sure Paul and Eliot, you guys picked up on as well, is the relation that the spirits and then the nightmares both have to Spren, and how they kind of behave similarly. So Painter, his entire job is walking around and binding these nightmares on the cognitive realm. So there's people all over the city having nightmares at night, and they can, if they travel around enough, they can manifest themselves on the physical realm and start doing damage. So his entire job as a painter is to walk around finding these nightmares, having a stronger cognitive connection to it than the nightmare has to whoever's imagining it, changing that into something harmless, and then it doesn't hurt anybody anymore. So I thought that was super cool, by the way. So what were you guys' thoughts on that?
He does that by painting them, right? Like by drawing them,
Right?
or whatever, drawing, painting, and I mean, it gave me distinct connections or like comparison to like how we see art used through a lot of things. Most notably, like with Shalon in the Stormlight Archive, and stuff. And so I was thinking like drawing comparisons to like light weaving and stuff like that in the cognitive realm, But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I also just couldn't get the picture out of my head that these are the Midnight Essence from Delanar's first like visions in the Way of Kings. Like the description seemed so spot on between the two, but I could be wrong. It probably isn't that important.
The connection that I made that I found very interesting is that these seem very similar to Spren in the fact that it took me back to that one interlude where it's these two random Ardents talking about Flame Spren.
Yep.
And they talk about how a Spren becomes what you define it as. So if you define a Flame Spren as 6 inches tall, it will be 6 inches tall. And so seeing that here with these nightmares, if you define it as bamboo, it'll be bamboo. And I just thought there has to be so much there, and I'm really excited to see it.
It did seem like there were a lot of correlations you could draw to Spren. And also even the way that like the narrator Hoyd was speaking was almost as if he was speaking to a Rosharan audience. He would make references like, oh, and it glows like the spheres that you're used to. Or, he'd make statements like that were very familiar to me as a Stormlight Archive reader. And so that got me curious as well.
So something that I picked up on that as well is that something I want to mention here. One of the first reactions I had was this, and I'll put it up on the screen for you guys. I'll just read it for you guys. I asked the question, so is he telling the story to someone from Roshar or someone on Scadrial, which is where Mistborn is? Because he mentions Scadrial by name, but then he also goes on to say they're using lanterns or spheres as you would know them. Or he uses the term chulls, he uses the term Vadens and Alethis, and it's all very Rosharan terms. But something that's interesting that I picked up on is the audio version and the written version that he released are different. And they are different, that there's different verbiage here. He deletes the sphere reference from the written, from the written thing he released. I did a Control F on his document that he released, and I hit spheres. It doesn't come up. He changed it, but in his spoken one, he mentions spheres. So that begs the question, which one is more recent and which one is going to make the final cut? Because these are unpublished so far. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in there where he talks about the Vaden and Alethi. He's talking to people who their first instinct would to be compare this to something they're familiar with, which would be comparing the person to someone who's Vaden. And so I think that would be in line with the spheres reference. However, as we do get the reference to light bulbs,
right,
as well as straight up saying Scadrial, and so maybe it's a diverse audience. Maybe there are multiple people.
I definitely get the feel. Sorry. I definitely get the feel that he's talking to a Rosharan world hopper, someone who is born to Roshar and like first thoughts are Rosharan thoughts, but they've seen different worlds, so they have different points of view.
I think my biggest question that I was taking away from this story is this: like, who is he talking to? I know we've seen where he's written letters to these other people who I don't really understand yet, but kind of know they're big, like Frost, like whoever. And I'm almost, from what we've been learning and talking about, I could honestly see this being a very big, like long-winded story that he's telling someone on Roshar, just like a character on Roshar, as like how he's shared stories with some other characters we've seen so far, like the Wandersail story, what was it?
Fleet.
The girl who looked up. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. As like, this is a big tale, but more like seeing parts of the world And I'm wondering who he would be talking to. If I were really throwing a guess out there, I would say he's talking to Yasna. That's kind of going off of Spencer's thing of maybe someone on Roshar who is like more of a normal human scale, but like big powers, like a world hopper or something, you know. So
All right, let's keep going.
Yumi hears some ancient spirit talk to her at the very end of chapter 6, begging her to help them become unbound, to free them. And then shortly after this event, something really weird happens between Yumi and Painter, which Brandon kind of spoils a bit later. But what I think has happened here is, let's take a step back. So we have a new shard called Virtuosity. This is new to us. Brandon had never revealed there was a shard named Virtuosity. The important thing is Virtuosity is dead. So I don't know how much we're going to learn about her, but apparently Virtuosity was a her, at least the vessel. At first, I thought Virtuosity was from virtuous, as in some, like, very honorable. And it felt very similar to honor to me. But then I actually defined Virtuosity, and it's actually great skill in music or other artistic pursuits. So like a virtuoso. So that was my confusion. I don't know if anyone else was confused by that, but I'm pretty sure that this is sort of an artistic, art-related shard, which would definitely puts focus on why these two magic systems on these two different planets are working the way they do, where, you know, you're basically creating art in order to control the magic. And that would make a lot of sense for a shard named Virtuosity using that definition. So I think that's really interesting. It also might make sense why Hoyd would like hanging out there. So Virtuosity splintered herself. Now, we don't know exactly the mechanics of that. And I think getting into the mechanics of that would be a bit spoilerly for this particular podcast. So I'm not going to get into that too much. But we know that Honor was splintered. We know a few other shards were splintered by an external force, by odium, or by battles. But Virtuosity was just like, I'm going to splinter myself. Now, whether that was intentional or unintentional, we don't know. But we do know it happened about, I think it said 1700 years ago. Now, timeline-wise...
Okay. So, Virtuosity, that was a big reveal for everybody in the fandom, not just Paul and Eliot. So you guys are getting fairly hot off the press Cosmere lore. So that's pretty cool for you guys. And
now, quick question.
Yep.
So is this, though, still one of the 16? So is this just a reveal of one of the unnamed 16, essentially?
Yes.
Isn't that the final of the 16 that we know?
No. You and Tim are waiting for one more. Paul and Elliot are waiting for like 7 more.
We're getting there. We're learning. I have to say, I didn't put together this stuff, but this is my favorite of all the things you've said, Ranks. I think this is super cool. The Virtuosity, like in the comparison with Virtuoso and like music, art. I myself love music and just lots of things and like kind of the performing fine arts and stuff. And so I think that's beautiful. And I could totally see that connecting to the depiction I got in Yumi's Planet, and the other, right? The Painter, which I feel like I didn't get as stark of imagery from Painter's world, which it's just kind of like dark and these like neon lights and stuff. So, but he's a painter. This is what he does, all that stuff, which is cool. On Yumi's Planet, I definitely just got like a beautiful depiction, at least in my mind's eye, of like this beautiful, like sunny landscape and kind of pristine, perfect, and very ritualistic. So yeah, I could totally imagine like arts and music and things being very interwoven in that. And I just think that's a beautiful depiction. Like, I think that's super cool.
I think that's really interesting because I had the opposite. I had a very vivid image of Painter's world and like the dark, brooding, Japanese, Korean inspired like cluster city that he's in, and he's going up and down the noodle shops and the alleys and stuff like that. I totally had that in my head. And it's always night, always neon blue, neon pink lights everywhere. And And then, similar to what Elliot was saying, it wasn't until my second read that I realized, oh, we're on two separate planets here. And the Yumi's planet is super hot. It's close to a red giant, which Ranks will talk about here in a second. And there's some interesting mechanics there, and then there's floating trees and tree hustlers, which is funny to me.
Also very possible that I did not have an accurate depiction of the world, but how I imagined it was very like peaceful gardens, like so I felt it was a great fit for this definition of virtuous.
The number one question I have, and the number one question he got on his spoiler stream, which I won't get into on this podcast. He had a spoiler question stream about this, these chapters. Is he was asked, did Virtuosity intend to shatter her, splinter herself? And like that's a huge question, and big implications on how shards behave and what their end goal is and why she would do that if it is intentional. Like there's so many questions there, and we haven't seen that before, so that was super cool to just get a bunch of questions off of one sentence. All right, let's keep going.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. The way the narrator is, it's using a lot of anachronisms. Hoyt is using anachronisms like light bulbs and firefighters, talking about space travel, to someone who seemingly is from Roshar. So
Ellie, did we lose you?
No, I'm here. Rank stole my word. I was going to try and sound smart by using the word anachronism, and there he goes using it already. Continue.
That's hilarious.
Thinking that at least the Hoyt who's telling the story is probably many, many years after Stormlight Archive, where Roshar is Cosmere aware, and they have things like light bulbs and firefighters. They're in more of a modern era or even futuristic era. They're aware that space travel is at least possible to do, and what that would mean. They're aware of the different shards and things like that. So Hoyt is talking to someone in some future time, but who knows when these events happened. And so it's a little bit hard to pinpoint, is Virtuosity still alive during the events of, say, Stormlight Archive? Or did Virtuosity splinter themselves after that? Or, what is this timeline? I have no idea. But at least at the time of this story, Virtuosity is splintered. And that we know that causes all sorts of problems. Like Honor is splintered, and you get these Spren all over the place who are, under no one's control and become sentient and things like that. Although that seemed to have happened even under Honor's watch, before Honor was splintered. But when a shard gets splintered, you get these weird things happening. If you've read Elantris, you know what I'm talking about there. But so we have all this free-flowing investiture that's become somewhat sentient and is very much controlled in the cognitive realm. That sounds a lot like something that might be happening in Threnody as well, something that's happening in Elantris. So that's something to keep an eye on.
So Paul and Eliot, you probably got half of his references there. The key into Honor dying and Spren being everywhere, and then Threnody. So that's where Odium and Ambition clashed, and we got all of our shades from Shadows for Silence. And but then Elantris you can kind of relate to, because we haven't read Elantris, but we have read Emperor's Soul, and that's the same planet there. So what'd you guys get from the timeline of where you guys think this is? I agree with him that whoever he's talking to, at least whoever he's talking to, is likely from Roshar and is familiar with technology that is modern day. Does that mean that Roshar is modern day? Maybe. Like that's likely, but it also could be someone from Roshar who has visited somewhere else, and then that person he's talking to is familiar with modern day technology and not necessarily Roshar as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. I think all of that logic makes perfect sense. the fact that he is making references to stuff that doesn't seem to fit into the world that at least I know of so far. I'm sure there's more of it that fits into the Mistborn world, but yeah, it does definitely suggest a future timeline.
I was a little confused. Yeah, I also don't know that I have that much to add to this, but I was a little confused with how many like actual real world Earth references there were. I was like, has like hypothetically Hoyd been to Earth? That'd be kind of fun, I guess. But like, it seemed like it because they were referencing things that were like normal day things in real life and stuff, and I didn't fully know what to make of that.
Just a quick brief to answer your question. Earth, Brandon Sanderson said Earth is not in the Cosmere. So
Okay.
like our Earth, you can't visit our Earth from the Cosmere. The Cytoverse, the Skyward, does reference our Earth and our history. So that's his distinction, so that all the theorists out there don't get too tangled up of could Spencer meet Hoyd at some point. Like, he's very specifically said, no, that's not a thing. And Earth is not in the Cosmere. So, but Hoyd certainly is referencing things that are Earth familiar. All right.
Let's untangent ourselves here. I think that what happened here is probably around the same time Virtuosity splintered themselves. The spirit of the planet, there was one planet, and the spirit of the planet became bound and split into two planets. And then they're separated by some sort of wall of misty investiture, dark misty investiture. And if you've read Mistborn, you might know more of what I'm talking about there, but I'll leave it at that. But that's why on one planet, and probably it's a red giant or something like that, the planet's close to the red giant, probably wasn't so close before it became a red giant. But there's a red giant, then there's the sunny planet that gets very hot. And so it's hotter than your average planet would be at that orbit. And then you've got mist in between, and then you've got cold planet that can't even see the sun because the sun, the investiture is blocking it from being seen. But then you can sort of see the sunny planet. I don't know, I'm getting confused. But the dark planet can see the sunny planet, but not the sun, which is really strange to me. But it can see the reflection of the sunny planet, and that's the only light they get from the sky. But then they also have these ribbons of light somehow that are investiture in the physical realm of some sort. So I think that's what happened. I think it was one planet because they share a common tongue. Like the tongue has the same root as themselves, like the language they speak. They seem to both be based off of Japanese/Korean culture. And so I think what happened is it was one planet. The planet got split into two. And I think probably all the people got split as well. Just everything split into two. There's now now there's the light orb and the dark orb, right? And I think that's why that was mentioned so many times in the story. That's one way that this magic works. And then the spirit of the planet became bound and trapped in that way. And so now, what Yumi has done is kind of found her opposite spirit. Because, the two opposite spirits, one's male, one's female, it kind of lines up. Yumi and Painter might be the same spirit that's been split into two. And now they're kind of swapping places, according to Brandon in the notes past that. So I think all of this lines up. And I think probably the ultimate goal of the book will be to unbind the spirit and reform the planet to become one, which, removes a lot of the issues that both planets are having by one being too hot, one being too cold. So those are my thoughts.
I'm going to jump in here. Sorry. Before I lose it. So if Hoyd is stuck in time because he was there when Virtuosity split, and something about the way he is invested, is causing him to be stuck in time.
So if Rank's theory is correct and they do reconnect everything, that's kind of what frees Hoyd up, is he's connected back to his body and he's good to go then.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have like a counterpart to split or like whatever, maybe. I have to say, so I had a lot of thoughts. I feel similar to Ranks was saying at the beginning, like, oh, he like knew it was Hoyd talking beforehand, and then Brandon confirmed it, and he didn't get to act super smart and clever for doing it. I feel like I had a similar thing, but I'm taking what he's saying a little bit further, and this is a very much like me and Elliot's level theory of I'm guessing with a lot of missing pieces that I don't get to know, but how we see Yumi's magic system, where they like have a spirit or whatever they're called, and like it's kind of a neutral thing, but they split it so at least part of it can be like extra. They're opposites. Like that's how they make lights, right? It's like a light and a dark part, and they get to use the light for like practical purposes and stuff. And I wonder if that's what Virtuosity did. Like initially, was she whatever the term is, shattered herself or whatever, and split this into the two planets, and that was like the purpose or why she did it to herself. Which then it's I don't know the details of this, so but that's where my mind went right away. And maybe they'd see throughout the rest of the story like a practical purpose or a way you can combine things back together, either for good or like other pieces putting them together. And that's kind of what we're seeing. The start of that is Yumi like doing that and bringing Painter somehow. I think that was cool that he was like maybe they're like the opposite spirits that were split, whatever. Like I could see that. That's really cool. But that's where my mind went, was that maybe these two planets were one, and that was kind of the shattering, was like the split into two there.
One thing that I just want to expound upon, which he said, which I think is brilliant, with the planet splitting and how they're working together. I think the sun is here, the red giant sun, planet 1 and planet 2. And planet 2 is on a constant lunar eclipse, if you will, of the sun. So planet 1 is orbiting the sun with a spin and has a normal day. And then planet 2 is over here, just on the same speed, never sees the sun, but sees planet 1.
Yeah, it's like constantly blocked.
Right.
I had that exact same thought as I was listening to you guys talk here, and the description of that planet in the sky on Painter's Planet almost seems to fit that. It's described as a bullet hole in the sky, bleeding pale light. It's almost as if, like the sun is behind it, like kind of streaming around it almost a little bit. The problem is what you just described is not possible through orbital mechanics as we know them, like in our solar system. The speed that you orbit the sun is determined pretty much completely by the distance you are from it. And so you can't do what you're saying in our physics.
Right.
Now, there could easily be other factors here that could be enabling this. There could be other bodies. I'm actually wondering if Rank's theory here about like the splitting of everything. What if the sun is split too? What if there's another like black hole, if you will?
Oh, a black
kind of.
Oh,
exactly. So that maybe the sun is blocked by the planet or something else that can see it, and there's a darkness body that's affecting the dark planet. Once you get that many different gravitational bodies affecting orbits, like anything's possible at that point. It gets really complicated. So complicated, but not, impossible.
That's wacky.
I really like what you just said.
It's
there
great having you.
Yeah, the splitting of the dark and the light, like the little orb thing, just going that one step further of saying that happened to the sun. All right, he's got a little bit more for us to go, but we'll finish it off here.
I have a lot of other thoughts, like related to Hoyd and design and these mists and these creatures, but I think this is the big takeaway I have that might be unique among people who are giving their perspectives. I haven't gone through and read the channel yet to see what others' perspectives are, so this is sort of my clean perspective on that, and I hope this was interesting, and I hope Trevor was able to edit this down into a decent length, but thank you again for this podcast. I really enjoy it. Please consider supporting the podcast through Patreon. If you enjoy it at all. I think that it is one of the best Cosmere podcasts out there, and I really enjoy it, and I hope you do too. And I will see you on the Discord.
Thank you, Ranks, for submitting that video. When I watched this earlier today, I was like, man, this is really, really good. I'm really glad he gave us this. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I was just going to remind everyone to also check out Ranks. It's very hard to say as a plural or possessive. Ranks' YouTube channel. Yes, make sure to check it out. We shout it out every time. It's kind of fun. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
He's live streaming Sudoku as we record this. I see it on my other monitor. So, all right. Anything that you guys want to bring up? I'm going to go through some more reactions, but there's only so much that you can pull out of 7 chapters, so he covered quite a bit, but I'll keep going for a couple other things.
Yeah, I had one thing. I really noticed how Painter and what Shy does in The Emperor's Soul are very similar. They're taking something that's formless, or in Painter's case, something that's formless and could go anywhere, and saying, well, you could be this, and it becomes that. And with Shy, what she does is she takes something that has this history, and she says, well, what if your history was like this? And changes it. It's very, very curious there, and very in line with the way investiture works, as far as we know.
Did any of you pick up on the use of the word Nimi or Nimi? So
I forgot about that till you mentioned it. Yes.
So Kaiser in our Discord brings this up. I'm just going to read his comment here.
Sorry, while you're pulling that up, I just remembered why that's a thing is because we always hear that sword Nimi talking about Nightblood.
Yep.
So, okay.
Now, isn't it Zeth who calls Nightblood that?
Yeah, and he's the only one that does.
Right. So this was a big. Lots of people weighed in on this in our Discord. Spunlines weighed in on this. Kaiser weighed in on this. Ingen weighed in on this, which I'll go through here in a second. But the use of the word Nimi is super interesting because Zeth just starts randomly calling Nightblood that, and the reader doesn't really think about it because, and this is something that Spunlines is saying, is that the reason why you don't really think about that is because Zeth has honorifics that he's been referring to people up until that point, and so you just assume this is another one of those.
Yeah.
However, with the use of this now you're trying to think of, okay, then did Nightblood tell him to call him that, and has Nightblood been here? So that's a question. Or is the story taking place after that, and somehow Zeth or the Shin people brought that here? There's plenty of questions. What do you guys think?
What if it's a little less connected than that? What if we know that Zeth went through a phase of many different owners, right? When he was, obeying his oath stone. What if in the long course of that, one of the owners was a person from this world, and that person told him to call him by that honorific, and somehow Zeth sees some sort of a similarity in that person, like there's some sort of correlation between that person and Nightblood, and so Nightblood is now using that honorific or Zeth is now using that honorific for Nightblood because of that owner he had at one point.
That's a curious idea. I wouldn't discount it, but I think it's more likely that it's some sort of shared origin culture. And while many things have changed, this particular honorific has stayed similar enough that when it's quote unquote translated into this other language, it comes out the same. Because it is another language where he's talking about, Brandon talks about there's highs and there's lows. And so there's honorifics, there's non-honorifics,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Don't worry, Elliot. I'm sure we'll figure out when we read Rhythm of War.
Do you guys think it could be a negative honorific?
I think so.
You think?
Could
think that's
Zeth
very
be like
possible.
so afraid of Nightblood that he is like calling it a like derogative name almost?
I don't necessarily think of it as like a bad turn, like bad, but almost like a mild talking down to, like, okay, like what in English, right? If someone's like, "Listen here, son," or like kid, like whatever. I could see it somewhat in that context. I'd have to go reread. But I feel like he kind of, the interactions I've seen between him and Nightblood is him not really trusting Nightblood entirely. So I could see it being kind of like a hush, like not a super like derogatory, like bad thing, but like a little
Because
not
Nightblood is described as somewhat childish several times.
Right. The only counter I have to that is the way it's used here. It's an honorific here. So Yumi, the quote is, "Yumi quickly rose. Is it time, Warden Nimi?" She said with enormous respect. Like, it has enormous respect right there next to it. So I would assume it's translated the same of, this is an honorific. Zeth is just, reverent to Nightblood, maybe to the point of fear of, you freak me out and you're way up here for me.
Yeah, it almost raises even more questions about the Zeth Nightblood interaction, because you could almost see fitting more what we were just talking about as more of the perhaps derogatory, but if this is indeed a master sword person, like how did this connection get drawn that he's using such of like a title for Nightblood? I actually like Tim's thought about like cultural origins. I know very little about the Shin people in general. I wonder if is this a Zeth thing, or is this a Shin thing? Are there other Shin people that use this term? That would shed some light on this investigation, I think.
One of the theories in our Discord, and this was from Secret Project 1, there's a one-liner in Secret Project 1 that says the Iriali are not originally from Roshar. And so, and we had learned that in Secret Project 1. So we were throwing around the possibility that maybe the Iriali brought that to Shinovar because they're right next to each other. And that's how that happened.
Aren't technically all of the humans not from Roshar?
Yes.
That's a good point.
True. I guess that's
I was
not...
about to say, I thought so.
That
wasn't it like the big mic drop.
We'd have to see the context for that statement, but that seems like zero new news to me.
Right. I mean, the Iriali had a name drop in Secret Project 1, of like they were, whatever. Something that's kind of removed from the story, but I think is interesting to talk about is these secret projects open a cool opportunity for Brandon Sanderson to have an independent like movie or adaptation contract, because these are self-published. All of these secret projects are going to be self-published, and so that makes it really easy as far as adaptations go, because all of them are fairly digestible. Like, all of them are around 100,000 words, whereas The Way of Kings is 400,000 words. and that's book 1. But all of these are fairly independent, and so you could use one of these secret projects to, get your first movie, get your first show.
Yeah, like jumpstart the
Right, get Hollywood interested in signing your Cosmere contracts. So this one, and specifically Secret Project 1, I think would be really cool standalone movies to jumpstart this.
Yeah, I'm behind that. That'd be great.
Yeah, the weird part will come in with like crossover, because if you ever name drop a character from Stormlight Archive, something that is owned by his publisher, not like, does that get into gray territory? But no, that's actually an interesting idea. Could he use this as like the gateway into attracting a bigger deal? I could totally see that happening.
That is a good point. Who has the rights to Hoyd?
Yeah.
Right? Like there's separate ownership between Mistborn or there's separate rights ownership between Mistborn and Stormlight. So who owns Hoyd as a character name? That's so weird, actually.
Yeah, we need a copyright lawyer to decipher that one.
Any closing thoughts?
I will just say, I loved this little glimpse, this little teaser of this story. I just felt like this was such an interesting world, and I'm just so impressed that one of the biggest differentiators, if you will, about Brandon Sanderson is the breadth of his work. That the amount of like different stories he is weaving together into one, and the amount of different settings he's got. He's got many different systems of planets, and he's telling stories on all these different places. And yet here's a probably brand new one, and it still feels different than anything we've seen before. Like, we're going through this world, and there's correlations, there's things that feel familiar. It feels like you're in the Cosmere, but then at the same time there's new stuff, and it's like I can easily picture this world separate than I can from Roshar, separate from that I can from even the other planets that we've just barely been on for some of these shorter stories. Like, that is really impressive writing right there. The fact that he can do that, even this short 7 chapters, gives me a pretty clear picture of what at least Painter's Planet feels like. I loved it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Feel free to read Secret Project 1 early chapters if you'd like to. The on Brandon Sanderson's podcast with his friend Dan Wells, I think his name is, they brainstorm a bunch of really bad world building ideas. His latest one was, what if you had a world, like a planet, and then a small planet on top of that planet, and everybody lives on the small planet, and the big planet is being pushed around by some giant force, and you have to balance. that was the. So to give you some context on the cool Brandon Sanderson ideas, he's got a lot of bad ones too. So just balance that out.
Wait, hold on. I'm still putting this imagery together. So everyone's on this little planet that's on the big planet.
Right.
Right. And they have to like collectively as a world like move around the planet to like stay balanced on the big planet.
Yes.
Okay, nice.
Yes, that was the pitch, and he got some of the same reactions that you just gave. Like, what on earth are you talking about?
I don't know how you make that into a story. Like, I would be curious to read, because like, how do you make that? Like, how do you come up with characters and they're like, all right, guys, I think we're starting to roll to the right a little bit. We need to get everyone to move to the left, like, or however physics works.
Then you just get this one main character of like, I don't want to. I'm going to go this way, and just throws everything off.
Exactly.
Yeah, somehow Brandon would make that interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Any more closing thoughts?
Just a big thank you to Ranks and all of our other contributors in our Discord for sharing your thoughts and helping us dive into these little secret projects. This has been really fun to get a little surprise glimpse into this and to be able to digest it with all you guys. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone watching, and who's listened to us talk about Stormlight and all kinds of dumb stuff. I also really appreciate Spencer and Tim being here, and Elliot and Trevor,
Yes.
that we made it 100 episodes. Honestly, when we started, I didn't think we would. I didn't know if we would keep going to 100 episodes. I didn't really think that we would. I didn't know, but it's really cool to see. That we've done this much and come a long way and just all the fun stuff. So
Yeah, and from a somewhat outsider perspective, it's been really cool to see you guys grow from episode 1 to now. Just like seeing you guys get more comfortable in the Cosmere and more comfortable like theorizing and talking and just like bouncing crazy ideas off each other. It's been really cool to watch.
Yeah, I agree. It's been incredible. And I recently did a sprint. I listened through like 10, 15, maybe even 20 episodes in a day or two. And so I'm finally caught up with you guys. And I have learned so much from you guys about these books. And I really appreciate it. It's been awesome.
I will say I put off making that intro clip that you guys saw at the beginning of this episode, beginning of the part 1 episode, for a while, because I did not want to click on episode 1 because I knew I was going to cringe at how poorly we were going to be talking. And I did cringe, but I did make it. And making all of those, like grabbing all those clips, I was just like, I don't enjoy our first 10 episodes. But you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet. So here we are.
yeah.
Just imagine what we'll be like at episode 200, 5 or 10 years in the future.
Yeah, 5 years from now
Yes.
again. Yeah.
5 years.
Dude, that was from episode 50.
Yes,
So
that was 50 episodes.
10 years from now.
Yep.
10 years from now when we're in episode 200 and we're like halfway through Rhythm of War. I also didn't realize we were talking about our predictions to Oathbringer on episode 56. That was a long time ago. That was a long time ago.
Oathbringer took us a while.
It took a long time. I didn't realize like almost half of our episodes have been Oathbringer.
Yeah. 40% of them. All right. Thank you for joining me, Paul and Eliot, and always, and thank you for joining me on the special episode, Spencer and Tim.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah. It's always great to be here.
Farewell.
Arrivederci.
To
I said that wrong.
To the next 100 episodes.